welcome Minister Sarah Mitchell, New South Wales Minister for Education. Welcome to Western Sydney Unfiltered. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. We'll kick things off straight away, and education, as you may know, has been a hot topic over the past 8 to 9 months, and it's one that we've featured quite strongly in this series. We've spoken to quite a number of figures, key figures in education over the past few months to talk through the experiences during this pandemic and how it's helped shape the learning experience of others. One of the consistent messages we've heard is that COVID has essentially fast-tracked the way things are done, facilitated some really positive and interesting ways we approach, in terms of how we approach the delivery of education. Is that a message you've heard? And what do you think will be some of the positive legacies that we'll take away from this whole experience?
Yeah, look, absolutely. That's something that I've heard. And I think, 2020 has been quite the year and certainly quite the school year. I think when we started at the beginning of term one, we wouldn't have thought we'd be learning from home and have some of the challenges that we've had. But I think what it's done is really shown how innovative and flexible our school system is. And I think our principals, our teachers, our staff have just done an amazing job. One thing that I consistently hear is people have such a higher appreciation for their children's teacher. That's something I see as a personal perspective as a parent. I think no one has ever thought more highly of their teachers that are educating their kids every day when we all had a bit of that experience of learning from home. So I think that's been a positive. But I think more broadly, it's really unpacked some of the issues around things like digital connectivity, how important that is. And there's ways that we've been able to break down a lot of the barriers. I think we've seen more families engaged in their children's learning, which I think is a good thing. But then also the way that we were able to use technology. We've set up things like online hubs where people can go on and get examples of homework tips and schoolwork opportunities for learning from home. We've had virtual classrooms where we've had literally teachers from all over the state come together on an online platform and share ideas and resources. So I think we've got to find the silver lining to the cloud, and there's certainly been a few of those examples come through, which is exciting and innovative. I think it's something that we can build on post-pandemic for sure.
Yeah, a lot's been spoken about the transition to online learning platforms, and there have been differing views on how we move forward, noting that the personal connection that comes from teachers in schoolrooms is obviously something that's never going to be replaced. How do we get that balance right between getting the right technology in the right settings so that it supports and enhances the learning experience?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that those personal relationships are so important when it comes to what happens in the school and in the classroom. And I think we all missed that when we did have learning from home. Parents did, teachers did. A lot of the students I spoke to said, yeah, we actually did miss being at school with our friends and our teachers. And I agree with you. We're never going to move away from that, nor should we, because that's such an important part where schools really are the centre of our communities. But one of the things too, I guess, is recognising that there is still a bit of a digital divide, knowing that sometimes, as policymakers, you might make the assumption that everyone has access to a device or access to the internet, and that's not always the case. So we were able to send out a lot of devices to schools to use. We looked at how we could use existing internet technology, download things at school that the kids could then take home. And look, I'm from a regional area. Obviously, we know that there's connectivity issues in some areas of the bush, but also parts of Western Sydney. I know that there are a lot of families that don't have access to those online tools. And I think we've got to get that balance right. We can't make the assumption that everyone can do this outside of school hours. So how do we better leverage our school telecommunications to help those kids and families so that no one's left behind? And that's something that we continue to work on. Yeah.
Glad you mentioned that. You mentioned some short-term initiatives you guys have introduced, but longer term, obviously, you touched on the regional issues and Western Sydney being one of the lower usage or lower have sort of communities that are don't have the same opportunities or backgrounds to be able to support access to the internet. As technology and online platforms become more prevalent, what do we need to be doing to ensure some of those disadvantaged communities don't fall through the cracks? Is there anything in place at the moment or any plan to sort of start addressing that digital divide?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So we've got a bit of a working group that we've set up, and we've already had a couple of rounds of consultation coming back from our schools and school communities saying what worked well for you during the pandemic, what did you notice, what could we pick up that we do, longer term in terms of education. So that work will continue throughout this year, so we can get a really good idea of where those gaps are. And we're looking at opportunities around digital transformation in our schools anyway. We've just recently announced an extension of our partnership with Telstra, where we're going to upgrade internet speeds and reliability at all of our schools. So we'll be the fastest public education system in the country when it comes to that access at school. So again, look at how we can use it, the schools being the centre of the community, and just that understanding, as I said, that everyone isn't on the same level playing field for access when they leave school. That to me as Minister has been really valuable to understand that and dig in a little bit deeper, and making sure that that's part of what we consider going forward to make sure we, support everybody.
Great. At a national level, we saw the budget come out last week, and the state budget obviously coming out next month. But nationally, one of the more contentious issues surrounds the future of NAPLAN, and obviously you've had some good views on that. And obviously some of the states are differing in where they stand on it. Your calls for a new national model, one which you think is probably more focused on outcomes, or better outcomes, not just better results. Can you talk us a bit more about that and where you'd like to see it end up?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, NAPLAN's been around now for over 10 years, and I think that everything over time can be improved, and it's certainly something that New South Wales feels pretty strongly about. We've partnered up with Queensland, Victoria and the ACT, and together we educate about 80% of students in Australia. And it's not about moving away from having a national test. We absolutely need that, and we need the data so that we can use it to improve student outcomes. But I do think that the test can be modernised. I think some of the opportunities, I guess, that have come through that review are things like moving the test to earlier in the year, putting it online so we can get the data back much more quickly, and then also looking potentially at a STEM component of the test, looking at critical thinking, really trying to get a greater snapshot of each student and what they're achieving while they're at school. And, I'm excited about reform in this area because I think data is so important and we want to be able to use it well. And I just think that, after more than a decade, everything could do with a little bit of work over time, and NAPLAN's something where I think we can improve, and that's what we're pushing for.
Yeah, great. Before you took on the role as Minister for Education, you were previously Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, and as you would know, Western Sydney is home to the largest urban Indigenous population in Australia. In a region where the rate of Indigenous school-age students is growing probably at 3 times the rate of the national average, is our schooling system keeping pace with the growing needs of Indigenous students, and what could we be doing better to make sure our system's more responsive to probably Indigenous communities and our other cultural communities as well?
Great question. And it's something for me, as you say, having had the Aboriginal Affairs portfolio for a couple of years and still, hearing from lots of stakeholders in that space, and particularly the AECG, who we work with quite closely. I think the ability to really, transform opportunities for a lot of our Aboriginal communities, and particularly in Western Sydney, really pivots on education. And I heard that when I was Aboriginal Affairs Minister, and I continue to hear that now. And obviously it's about making sure we have those good local partnerships. I think local context is so important when it comes to supporting our Aboriginal students, and also making sure that we do have the right supports in place. We've got targets around wanting to see higher HSC completion rates for our Aboriginal students, but listening to the community, listening to the people about what's going to work, and knowing that there will be localised. What works well in Western Sydney might be different to what works well in Western New South Wales. And, we've got our Connected Communities Schools program, which often have high Aboriginal population of students there, and just trying to think about ways that we can be a bit more innovative, and look for opportunities post-school, see what we can do to help with heading on to university, heading into the workforce, traineeships, further employment and training. And I think that's the goal for every student. And if there's things that we need to do more so for our Aboriginal communities, then we should absolutely be doing that.
Yeah, hopefully the Kimber Wiley Centre out at the old Wayland High School site, one which I believe you opened was been a couple of years ago now, which
Yeah.
we're very hopeful that that can play a big role in establishing a bit of a pathway for young Indigenous students in that area.
Oh, look, absolutely. And that connection with industry. And I think Western Sydney is such a powerhouse of growth, and it's such an exciting time for that part of the state. So being able to tap into that opportunity, I think the sky's the limit, and we should see it as an exciting time.
Yeah. Just in closing, we've heard about the change and the challenges that our students have faced this year. And hopefully they've also picked up a few things along the way that will help with their growth in the long term. What have you learnt when you look back over the past 6 months? What are the lessons that Minister Mitchell has taken away from this whole thing?
I think making sure that we don't forget about our student and staff wellbeing. I think it's been a tough year, and I think making sure that we're across, what supports we've got at school, and just checking in, making sure everyone's okay. It has been disruptive, and I think for some of our Year 12 students who are starting exams soon, it's been a bit of an up and down year. So while obviously focusing on education and outcomes is critical, making sure everyone's okay as part of this is also something that's front and centre in my mind. And then I just think more broadly across government, even outside of my portfolio, not to lose some of the innovation that we've put in place around things like using technology, whether it's Zoom or Teams or those sort of platforms. If there's ways that we can do that both in government, in business and in industry, I think we've kind of broken down some of the geographical barriers that can exist for growth, whether it's parts of Western Sydney or Western New South Wales or regional areas. I think there's a real chance that because COVID has kind of forced us to work in this way, it's opened up a lot more opportunity and potential. And I think, again, that's something that could be really exciting going forward.
Yeah. Minister Mitchell, we've got the HSC kicking off in a few weeks' time. Do you have one final message for all those young, aspiring Year 12 students about to enter into their exams?
Yeah, look, just do your best. That's all anyone can ever ask for you, and that there's plenty of people around to help you and support you along the way.
Minister Mitchell, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and thank you on behalf of the dialogue as well. I think you touched on it earlier, the responsiveness, the decisiveness, and the agility that the government's shown, particularly in those frontline areas like education, health, has been remarkable. So thank you for your leadership during this period as well.
Look, my pleasure. It's always great to engage with you all, and hopefully we can chat again soon.
Great. Thanks again, Minister Mitchell.